As the sun slides behind the jagged horizons of the Arizona desert, the final streaks of crimson light stretch across miles of red canyons, casting shadows that move like ancient spirits drifting between stone corridors. The wind whispers over the sand, carrying with it the faint echo of lives once rooted here, civilizations that appeared, flourished, and then slipped into silence so absolute that even time seems hesitant to disturb their memory. Archaeologists sift through fractured pottery, eroded foundations, and cryptic glyphs, piecing together theories that explain fragments but never the entire narrative. Science offers timelines and structured interpretations, yet none fit perfectly, none resolve the sudden rise and disappearance of cultures that once shaped this land. And then there are the legends, stories told by tribal elders of sky-born visitors, underground cities glowing with eternal fire, and people who could read the desert like scripture. These tales are often dismissed by academics, but they refuse to fade, lingering like a stubborn mirage on the horizon, as if the desert itself protects truths too potent to release. As night settles, the desert becomes a vast, breathing archive, a place where every grain of sand holds a memory and every shadow hides a possibility. This is where myth and archaeology collide, where evidence blurs into speculation and speculation sharpens into unsettling clarity. Beneath these whispering dunes lie questions older than any artifact and mysteries deeper than any canyon. Their rise and fall ripple through the landscape, hinting at forces far greater than any modern interpretation can comfortably contain even now. Tonight, we step into that silence and search for answers left behind by civilizations that defied explanation, waiting patiently beneath the cooling desert sky. But before the journey begins, one question lingers like a pulse beneath the sand: what happened here, and why? According to the official archaeological timeline, the story of the early Southwest begins with three major cultures: the Hohokam, the Mogollon, and the Ancestral Puebloans. Each is presented as a triumph of adaptation, a testament to human ingenuity in one of the harshest environments on the continent. The Hohokam, often credited as desert engineers, carved out hundreds of miles of irrigation canals that rivaled anything found in ancient Mesopotamia. These waterways fed vast agricultural fields of corn, beans, and cotton, transforming arid plains into thriving settlements. Their craftsmanship extended beyond utility. They created intricate shell jewelry and pottery, evidence of long-distance trade stretching toward the Pacific and even into Mesoamerica. To the east, the Mogollon people built pit houses and multi-room villages perched along forested highlands. Their pottery, decorated with delicate black-on-white designs, suggests a culture with both artistic depth and sophisticated ritual practices. Meanwhile, the Ancestral Puebloans constructed architectural wonders that still inspire awe. Towering stone complexes at Chaco Canyon aligned with celestial events, while the cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde cling to canyon walls with mathematical precision. Archaeologists describe these accomplishments confidently, as if tracing a clearly defined progression from small nomadic bands to complex, stable societies woven tightly into the desert's rhythm. Yet beneath this orderly narrative lie fractures, details that don't quite align with the clean timelines presented in textbooks. Some structures appear significantly older than the cultures credited with building them, raising questions about forgotten predecessors or lost phases of development. There are trade goods from regions the official narrative claims had no meaningful connection at the time, hinting at networks larger and older than acknowledged. Entire populations vanished from established settlements without signs of war, famine, or disease, just abrupt cessation, as though thousands of people simply stood up one day and walked into the desert, leaving perfectly functional cities behind. Even the iconic Chaco roadways stretch in directions that seemingly lead nowhere, carved with a precision inconsistent with their supposed purpose. Archaeologists call them ceremonial pathways, a tidy explanation that avoids admitting the possibility of something deeper. And throughout these regions, evidence emerges, half chronicled, half dismissed, suggesting technologies, alignments, and cultural connections far more advanced than the limited timelines allow. This contrast between official certainty and unresolved anomalies forms a quiet tension in the archaeological world. Science offers structured explanations, but the land itself whispers contradictions. The more we study, the more the puzzle grows, not smaller, but stranger. Because if the recognized cultures weren't responsible for everything we find, then we must confront a possibility far more unsettling. But what if these aren't the first civilizations here? Beneath the familiar story taught in museums and university halls lies another Arizona, one stacked in layers of time that don't fit neatly into the accepted archaeological script. When researchers dig below the foundations of known Hohokam or Mogollon settlements, they sometimes encounter older strata containing signs of habitation far earlier than official timelines claim. Charcoal remnants that date beyond recognized occupation periods. Stone tools that don't match any known cultural style. And petroglyphs, etched deep into canyon walls, depicting figures, creatures, and celestial events that predate the very cultures credited with carving them. Some of these rock carvings resemble astronomical diagrams far more complex than those attributed to early desert farmers. Others depict what appear to be massive waves or fires sweeping across the land, visual echoes of cataclysms that shouldn't align with the desert's known geological past. Yet these motifs repeat across Arizona, from the Verde Valley to the rugged Superstition Mountains, as if multiple societies experienced the same shattering event and tried desperately to immortalize it in stone. Geologists offer straightforward explanations. They argue these layers simply represent earlier climatic shifts, migration waves, or natural erosion that mixed materials from different eras. To them, the anomalies are coincidences, misreadings, or artifacts moved by floods long after their creation. But Native American oral histories tell a different story, one that feels uncomfortably precise. Hopi and Zuni traditions speak of worlds rising and collapsing, of ancient peoples guided underground to survive massive floods, and of civilizations wiped clean before new ones emerged. These stories aren't vague allegories, they contain repeating symbols, timelines, and warnings that mirror the very petroglyphs carved into canyon stone. And then there is the stonework. In certain remote desert regions, blocks of basalt and sandstone appear cut with lines so straight they resemble pre-industrial machining. Some align with solstices, cross-canyon sight lines, or subterranean chambers whose purposes remain unknown. These formations aren't documented in major archaeological databases, dismissed instead as natural fractures, despite their geometric precision. Local hikers whisper about discovering strange foundations, only to return later and find the area fenced off, reburied, or labeled as private land. A handful of researchers, those who've spent decades studying Arizona's geological scars, admit privately that the land suggests multiple buried timelines. Civilizations rising, wiped away, rising again. But such claims rarely make it past peer review, not because they're disproven, but because they threaten the clean, linear progression academia prefers. A cyclical history is chaotic. It's messy. It invites questions that standard science isn't prepared to answer. And that's where the real suspense begins. Reports circulate of sites in Arizona abruptly restricted from public access. Caves sealed after routine geological surveys. Artifacts photographed and then quietly removed. Anomalous structures mentioned in early field notes but absent in final reports. Even seasoned archaeologists admit off the record that some discoveries vanish before they can be studied, absorbed into a bureaucracy that doesn't explain, only obscures. If true, then Arizona's deserts aren't just remnants of past cultures, they're burial grounds for entire forgotten ages. Layers erased, rewritten, and hidden beneath foundations that only pretend to be the beginning. And if those layers are the remnants of civilizations older than any recognized culture, then one question surfaces from the sand, as persistent as the desert wind: how many times has Arizona been rebuilt from scratch? The Hohokam stand as one of the Southwest's greatest enigmas, not because they vanished, but because they mastered water in a land defined by its absence. Their canal system, spanning hundreds of miles across the Salt and Gila River basins, was engineered with a precision modern hydrologists still struggle to explain. These channels weren't crude ditches, they were graded with exact slopes to keep water flowing for miles without stagnation or overflow. Some extend longer than Roman aqueducts, yet official timelines insist the Hohokam had no advanced mathematics, no written blueprints, and no metal tools for measurement. Archaeologists often praise their achievements, but rarely question the implications. How did a culture without formal engineering traditions design hydraulic networks capable of supporting tens of thousands of people? Their canals required constant maintenance, seasonal timing, and collaborative city-level governance. Yet the structures show a level of planning that suggests long-term astronomical observations, with certain canal orientations aligned to solstice positions and shadow paths across nearby buttes. The official explanations feel tidy. The Hohokam were ingenious farmers who learned through trial and error. But trial and error doesn't build a near-perfect hydrological grid. Trial and error doesn't sustain a desert civilization for over a millennium. When mainstream researchers address the Hohokam collapse around the 1400s, they default to familiar theories. Drought. Warfare. Disease. Social fatigue. But each narrative crumbles under scrutiny. Triering data shows that drought cycles strained the region, yet the Hohokam had already survived harsher periods. Warfare leaves scars, burn layers, mass graves, weapon caches, yet none appear at their major sites. As for disease, no biological evidence suggests an epidemic capable of wiping out an entire culture. What remains instead is silence, villages emptied abruptly, canals left half-maintained as if workers stepped away mid-task. Pottery styles shift, ritual items disappear, and trade goods from distant regions abruptly cease. A civilization that once connected to the Gulf of California, northern Mexico, and the Pacific coast suddenly withdraws from the world, leaving behind architecture too advanced to match its supposed timeline. More curious still are artifacts that don't belong. Shells carved with motifs not found in known Hohokam symbolism. Stones shaped with angles inconsistent with their typical tools. And imported materials from regions they weren't believed to contact at the time. These anomalies rarely make headlines, they linger in academic footnotes like inconvenient truths that don't fit the accepted story. Some researchers whisper about a deeper intelligence guiding the canal system, mathematical planning beyond the capacity of early desert farmers. Others point to the uncanny precision of platform mounds that mirror astronomical cycles, suggesting the Hohokam tracked celestial movements with far greater accuracy than officially acknowledged. If these clues point to anything, it's that the Hohokam were part of a larger, older knowledge stream, an inheritance whose origins have been obscured by layers of sand and scholarship. Their disappearance wasn't a gentle fading. It was abrupt, decisive, and unnatural. Even more unsettling are the restricted zones, areas where ancient canal branches curve into regions now marked off-limits due to modern infrastructure or preservation concerns. Local historians claim some of these areas contain subterranean chambers, stone alignments, or abandoned survey markers hinting that earlier researchers found something unexpected. A few fragments of correspondence from early 20th century excavations mention anomalous construction beneath primary layers, a phrase never clarified in official reports. If accurate, it suggests the Hohokam may have built atop something older, inheriting knowledge rather than inventing it. Their sudden withdrawal then takes on a darker tone, as though they confronted forces far beyond environmental hardship. The pattern becomes impossible to ignore. They didn't just disappear, something forced a collapse. Far beyond the mapped archaeological zones, past the gravel roads, dry washes, and sunburned mesas, lie stretches of Arizona desert where ruins appear in places they simply shouldn't. Scattered across these remote expanses are remnants of settlements with architectural patterns that don't match Hohokam precision, Mogollon craftsmanship, or ancestral Puebloan geometry. Instead, they hint at something older, something unaccounted for in any official chronology. Low stone walls form perfect right angles, plazas appear arranged along geometric axes, and collapsed foundations trace the outlines of structures far larger than anything known cultures were believed capable of constructing in these desolate regions. Explorers who've stumbled across these sites describe the same unsettling sensation. The ruins feel like the shell of a city abandoned long before history began recording names. Some speak of underground chambers carved into bedrock, rectangular rooms with ceilings too smooth to be natural erosion. Others report sealed tunnels, their entrances obstructed by precise stone blocks as if intentionally hidden. When amateur researchers attempt to return with better equipment or GPS tags, the landmarks often seem to shift or vanish beneath drifting sand, as if the desert itself conspires to erase them. Scientific institutions remain conspicuously quiet about these outlying ruins. Official surveys list them as undetermined prehistoric sites, with no further explanation. Yet independent investigators, hikers, desert rangers, and off-grid wanderers, describe features that don't align with the simplicity implied by those labels. Strange masonry using interlocking stones, carved steps descending into darkness, and plazas aligned to sunrise angles rather than typical agricultural layouts. Some find shards of pottery with designs unrelated to any documented Southwest tradition, while others report symbols etched into rocks resembling neither petroglyphs nor known tribal markings. These accounts aren't confined to fringe storytellers. In the early 20th century, several field journals make cryptic references to ghost cities discovered during infrastructure surveys. One engineer noted a series of square platforms stretching across a ridge line, each placed at an almost identical elevation. Another recorded finding a cavern with smoothed interior walls and what appeared to be a sealed passage, only to return days later and find the entrance buried beneath freshly shifted earth. No official excavations were ever published on these discoveries, and the journals faded into obscurity, quiet footnotes in archives few people read. Legends echo these mysteries with uncanny parallels. Navajo stories speak of cities swallowed by the earth after great upheavals. Yavapai elders tell of people who built vast stone houses in the First World, only to vanish when the land beneath them turned black. Even the Spanish explorers described rumors of ancient pueblos hidden in the desert, abandoned before the tribes they encountered ever existed. These aren't casual myths, they are patterns repeated across generations, matching physical ruins scattered far from any recognized cultural footprint. The contrast is striking: science offers silence, while eyewitnesses offer detail. The academic void becomes louder with every new account. Whether through oversight or deliberate omission, the absence of explanation leaves these vanished settlements hanging like unresolved chords in Arizona's historical symphony. This is more than a puzzle of forgotten towns. It is the widening of a mystery, one that suggests the desert guarded entire urban landscapes long before recorded cultures took root. These ruins are not outliers, they are clues pointing toward civilizations erased from memory but not entirely from stone. And if lost cities lie hidden beneath the sands, then the story of Arizona is far older, and far stranger, than we've been taught. Long before archaeologists drew timelines or labeled cultures, the first historians of this land, the indigenous nations of the Southwest, preserved their past in stories spoken across generations. To the Hopi, Navajo, Zuni, and Apache, these stories are not fantasies. They are memories. Accounts of worlds that rose, collapsed, and rose again. And at their center stand the first people, beings who lived before the Great Flood, who built cities now lost beneath desert stone, and who carried knowledge far beyond what modern researchers expect from ancient societies. The Hopi speak of multiple worlds, each destroyed when humanity lost balance with creation. According to their tradition, the first world fell to fire, the second to ice, and the third to a catastrophic flood that reshaped the land. Survivors were guided into the fourth world, the one we inhabit now, by sky beings known as Katsanim. These beings are not framed as gods but as intermediaries, teachers who arrived from above, warned of disaster, and helped early humans rebuild. The Hopi insist these cycles are real history, not symbolic parables. Zuni stories describe a time when people lived in vast cities before a great darkness covered the land. Some were said to have descended into caverns to survive. These accounts echo the mysterious underground chambers explorers claim to find in remote regions of Arizona, structures official archaeology avoids addressing. Navajo traditions speak of holy people who shaped humanity and alien enemies who brought destruction, hinting at conflicts far older than any tribal memory. The Apache tell of star travelers who arrived during a past age and imparted warnings about the Earth's cycles of ruin. When placed beside mainstream archaeology, these legends appear impossible. Yet their consistency is difficult to ignore. Different nations, separated by language and distance, recount parallel histories, advanced societies, catastrophic resets, sky beings who intervened, and survivors who emerged into a new world to begin again. Mythologists call them metaphors, historians call them folklore. But the precision of these accounts, the repeated floods, the firestorms, the underground refuges, aligns eerily with geological anomalies and unexplained ruins scattered across the region. Perhaps the greatest tension lies between interpretation and possibility. If these stories preserve memories of events lost to conventional chronologies, then indigenous oral history may represent the oldest surviving record of North America's forgotten civilizations. The legends don't feel like fiction. They feel like encoded warnings, narratives shaped by people who witnessed far more than science currently acknowledges. Through these stories, a startling idea emerges: humanity may not be experiencing its first age of knowledge. It may be recovering from cycles of collapse that ancient cultures remembered long after the evidence was buried. And that raises an unsettling possibility: the past wasn't erased by time alone. It was reset. In the quiet corners of Arizona's archaeological record, buried in old field notes, forgotten museum boxes, and whispered accounts from private collectors, lie artifacts that should not exist. Pieces that challenge timelines, disrupt academic certainty, and suggest a history far older and more complex than the official narrative allows. These objects are rarely displayed, often dismissed, and sometimes quietly removed from public view. Yet each one raises the same unsettling question: who created them, and when? Among the most controversial discoveries are metal alloys found in strata predating any known metallurgy in the Southwest. A handful of early excavations reported copper-tin mixtures, true bronze, embedded alongside pre-Hohokam tools. Mainstream researchers explain them away as contamination, insisting the metals must have been introduced later by settlers or mining operations. But several of these alloys were unearthed deep within sealed layers untouched for centuries, challenging the notion of accidental intrusion. Then there are the pottery shards. Some bear markings resembling Mesoamerican scripts, others show geometric patterns common to cultures thousands of miles away. A few fragments display pigments that don't match any locally available mineral sources. Official reports categorize them as trade anomalies or stylistic coincidences, but the sheer number found across remote areas suggests something more profound, perhaps long-distance cultural connections far older than accepted timelines acknowledge. Even stranger are the glyphs carved into canyon walls and basalt boulders. Certain symbols resemble Old World characters, spirals like those in Celtic sites, crosses similar to pre-Christian designs, and star charts depicting constellations as they would have appeared thousands of years before the arrival of known cultures. Archaeologists dismiss these as misinterpretations, insisting they are purely indigenous motifs. Yet some glyphs appear in locations with no known habitation, carved with techniques inconsistent with tools attributed to any Southwest culture. Maps present an even deeper mystery. A controversial parchment, whose authenticity remains debated, reportedly showed waterways in central Arizona long before the Hohokam canals existed. Another map-like carving found near the Mogollon Rim appears to depict constellations aligned over a landscape that no longer matches modern geography. Despite photographs and field sketches, both artifacts disappeared before comprehensive analysis could be completed. And then there are the artifacts that never reach public documentation at all. Private collectors across Arizona have quietly admitted, off the record, to possessing stone tablets with unfamiliar writings, metal figurines with non-native features, and carved objects made with precision beyond stone tools. Some claim to have found them during construction projects or while exploring desert caverns. Others purchased them from estate sales where previous owners kept their discoveries hidden for decades. Most troubling are accounts from archaeologists themselves. A few retired researchers speak of artifacts that were catalogued, tagged for study, and then abruptly transferred to undisclosed repositories. One described a sealed chamber uncovered near a canal system, containing stone boxes filled with objects not consistent with regional typology. Within weeks, the site was closed, the report amended, and the artifacts never mentioned again. Mainstream science urges skepticism, calling these cases misidentifications, hoaxes, or fringe speculation. But the pattern is impossible to ignore. Evidence that contradicts accepted history is often dismissed before it is examined. The silence around these artifacts doesn't stem from lack of intrigue, it stems from the threat they pose to established timelines. If even a fraction of these objects are authentic, then the Southwest was once home to cultures with knowledge, connections, and technologies far beyond what the current narrative allows. And that means the true story of Arizona isn't hidden, it's buried. The Grand Canyon is more than a scar carved by the Colorado River, it is a vast labyrinth of stone where entire ages of history lie stacked like forgotten pages. But among all its mysteries, none is more controversial, more electrifying, or more aggressively denied than the story of a hidden civilization buried deep within its cliffs. It began, at least in the public record, in 1909 when the Arizona Gazette published a front-page article detailing an expedition funded by the Smithsonian Institution. According to the report, explorer G.E. Kincaid had discovered a massive cave system several hundred feet above the canyon floor, accessed by rope after days of navigating treacherous ravines. Inside, he claimed, were chambers filled with artifacts unmistakably Egyptian in style, statues of deities, mummies wrapped in hemp-like cloth, copper tools, and hieroglyphic inscriptions covering the walls. The article described entire room complexes, a grand hall large enough for thousands to gather, storage rooms packed with strange seeds, and crypts arranged with geometric precision. It portrayed a subterranean city hidden within the canyon sandstone layers, suggesting a culture with architectural knowledge far beyond what was expected in ancient North America. The newspaper even mentioned academic excitement, claiming the Smithsonian planned to analyze the finds and make a formal announcement. That announcement never came. Instead, the Smithsonian denied the entire story. Their official stance, unchanged for more than a century, is that no such expedition occurred, no report exists in their archives, and no artifacts were ever recovered. They insist the article was a fabrication or a journalistic misunderstanding. Case closed. But cracks appear in this denial when you look closer. The Arizona Gazette was a reputable paper at the time, and its article is written with extraordinary detail, far more than a casual hoax would require. Several early 20th century explorers referenced rumors of sealed caves, carved steps, and unusual artifacts found high in the canyon walls. Some river runners spoke of discovering entrances before federal restrictions tightened. Even today, the region where Kincaid supposedly made his discovery, the area around the Isis Temple formation, is heavily restricted, patrolled, and officially off-limits to the public. Geologists add another layer to the puzzle. Certain cavern formations in the Grand Canyon don't fit typical erosion patterns. Some chambers appear unnaturally symmetrical, others contain ventilation shafts inconsistent with natural processes. A handful of independent researchers have found tool marks on stone ledges, as if ancient hands shaped parts of the canyon interior long before modern climbers ever set foot there. And then there are the explorer logs, fragments of personal diaries found in archives and estate sales. One mentions a cave lined with idol-like figures staring from the shadows. Another recounts a chamber so meticulously carved it seemed impossible nature had any part in it. A third describes being escorted out of the canyon by federal agents after attempting to photograph a sealed entrance. These aren't polished academic claims, they're raw, uneasy accounts written by people who had nothing to gain by inventing them. Official silence only deepens the intrigue. The Smithsonian's denial is absolute, yet they offer no explanation for why significant portions of the canyon remain restricted under vague classifications such as cultural protection zones. No excavation reports. No clarifications. Just empty space where answers should be. The contrast could not be sharper, a century-old newspaper detailing a discovery of staggering significance, and an institution that insists it never happened. One side offers vivid descriptions, the other offers absence. And in that absence, the mystery grows. If the Grand Canyon truly holds the remnants of a hidden civilization, whether Egyptian, local, or something far older, it would rewrite not just regional history, but global history. It would force us to question migrations, forgotten technologies, and the possibility that ancient cultures were far more interconnected than we imagine. Perhaps that is why the story remains buried. Not because it is false, but because the truth carries weight. And so we return to the canyon, its stone walls towering like the battlements of a forgotten kingdom, its depths whispering secrets older than nations. If even one lost civilization existed here, sealed in chambers of shadow and silence, how many more lie waiting beneath the desert stone? For centuries, scholars have tried to explain why entire cultures across the Southwest, Hohokam, Mogollon, Ancestral Puebloans, and others never formally named, collapsed in ways that defy conventional logic. The standard theories line up neatly in textbooks: megadrought, resource exhaustion, warfare, volcanic activity, or simple social decline. But when each theory is tested against the evidence, the certainty dissolves. What emerges instead is a pattern of disappearance so abrupt, so widespread, and so coordinated that it suggests forces far beyond ordinary environmental stress. Megadrought is the most common explanation. Tree ring data shows severe dry periods that certainly strained agriculture. And yet, these cultures survived harsher droughts before. The Hohokam thrived for centuries during fluctuating water cycles, demonstrating resilience and engineering brilliance. If drought alone caused their collapse, why did it happen simultaneously across distant regions? Why did entire cities empty at once, leaving no transitional settlements or signs of prolonged struggle? Resource depletion offers another tidy narrative, but it crumbles under scrutiny. Archaeological layers show no evidence of excessive deforestation or soil exhaustion. In many abandoned regions, the land was still fertile. Canals still functioned. Fields were still viable. It's as if the people walked away not because they couldn't survive, but because they chose, or were forced, to leave suddenly. Warfare leaves unmistakable marks: burned layers, shattered fortifications, mass graves. None appear in the major abandonment zones. Volcanic events. While eruptions like sunset craters shaped the landscape, they were too localized to explain continent-wide cultural withdrawal. Cosmic catastrophes, meteor impacts or atmospheric disturbances, remain theoretical, but even these lack definitive geological signatures matching the timelines of collapse. What remains is the strangest explanation of all: we don't know. And that uncertainty is terrifying. Losing a village is understandable. Losing dozens of cities, across hundreds of miles, almost simultaneously. That shakes the very foundations of our understanding of human resilience. It suggests that ancient societies may have faced forces we can hardly imagine, forces capable of uprooting not just populations, but entire eras. This is where speculative theories enter, tiptoeing between science and possibility. Some researchers propose solar events, intense radiation bursts or geomagnetic storms, that could have disrupted climate, agriculture, or even human cognitive stability. Evidence of ancient solar anomalies appears in ice cores and tree rings across the globe, hinting at cycles of cosmic upheaval. Others suggest a massive ancient migration, triggered by knowledge or warnings lost to us. Indigenous oral histories consistently reference world-ending events, firestorms, floods, sky changes, stories that could encode memories of real catastrophes. If these people had fled because they foresaw something, their abandonment wasn't collapse, it was evacuation. More radical is the idea of pre-Columbian globalization, ancient cultures connected across oceans long before recorded history. Pottery styles, myths of sky beings, and unexplained trade goods hint that the Southwest may have been part of networks that spanned continents. If such networks crumbled, the ripple effects could have triggered regional collapse. Each theory stretches conventional boundaries but gains strength from one undeniable truth: the official explanations don't add up. The desert's silence hides something larger than droughts or tribal conflicts, something that reset entire societies simultaneously. It is this psychological unease, this feeling that history is missing a chapter, that fuels the final question: did these civilizations fall, or were they responding to forces still beyond our understanding? The mystery isn't merely archaeological, it's existential. Across Arizona's vast horizons, the desert stretches like an ancient manuscript, its canyons, ruins, and shifting sands forming chapters still half buried, half whispered. Every discovery, no matter how small, seems to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. A pottery shard that shouldn't exist, a glyph carved where no culture is known to have lived, a ruin aligned with stars older than the accepted timeline, all of it forms a puzzle that refuses to settle into a simple picture. Here, the past doesn't feel finished. It feels paused. As twilight settles over the red stone cliffs, the desert becomes something more than a landscape. It becomes a presence, watching quietly as researchers, explorers, and storytellers try to decode what earlier worlds left behind. Official narratives attempt to flatten the strangeness, drawing neat lines across centuries of human history. But the land pushes back. Each canyon wall seems to insist that the story is wider, deeper, and far older than anyone imagined. The silence isn't empty, it's patient. And patience is the desert's greatest strength. Civilizations rise and collapse, theories evolve and crumble, but the truths buried beneath the dust endure. Somewhere under these shifting dunes may lie the remnants of societies erased by catastrophe or concealment. Somewhere in the shadowed cliffs might be corridors carved by forgotten hands. Somewhere in the hidden chambers of the Grand Canyon could rest artifacts that would overturn everything we think we know. Perhaps the most compelling mystery isn't whether these stories are real, but why they persist. Why do so many legends, anomalies, and unanswered questions converge here? Why this land, this desert, this silent expanse? Maybe it's because Arizona remembers. Maybe it always has. As we leave this journey behind, one thing becomes clear: the desert isn't done speaking. It offers clues in fragments, whispers in symbols, and warnings in its legends. The more we uncover, the more we realize how little we truly understand. Arizona isn't a closed book, it's a beginning. And for those willing to look deeper, beyond the official explanations, beyond the comfortable certainty of textbooks, the story only grows more compelling. Because if the desert has guarded its secrets this long, who's to say it has revealed the greatest ones at all? The mystery isn't over. It's only waiting for the next explorer.